Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's July 27th, 2018, and today I thought it was time to do a garden update. We have had a little bit of rain recently. We've been in the midst of a pretty significant drought this year. And so the plants haven't done nearly as well as I would like them to do, despite us using the drip irrigation and in some places the overhead irrigation. So, and I'll try and describe some of the challenges we've had throughout the process as the video goes on. But we're starting off over here in the western garden plots and up against the workshop area. The other side over there is where the greenhouse is going, the chicken coop, work area, and all that. So I'm going to turn the camera around and talk a little bit about what we've got started here. Okay, right up against the building, right up here, the workshop area, we have hardwood cuttings. So there's two, I actually put several different plants in here, only two of which have done pretty well so far. That's the elderberry plants, which are wild to this area. So I did some hardwood cuttings in the fall time, and they seem to be doing pretty well. And the pink currants. Now they're amongst a whole bunch of clover in here. There's some dandelions, some other weeds in there. And I wish I had just the white clover here, but we have some of the red and another trillium clover species. So they're doing pretty well so far. Then we have two permanent raised beds of sweet corn right here. And the sweet corn, let me see if I can get the camera here to. So here's the two permanent raised beds of sweet corn, and they are doing pretty darn well. There's two rows in each one of these permanent raised beds. So that's what we've got there. I'm going to move the camera. Okay, now that we're away from the wall, we could see more of the crops here. I put the corn next to the building to try and decrease the amount of wind damage, since we get the winds out of the west, and that way over there is the west, and until the greenhouse is up we're going to have pretty substantial winds that come over and hit this. And we had some high winds the other day, so about 1/4 of the corn got knocked down, the ones next close to the building there. And so we always plant more than what we need. The next row there is a row of the carrots, and they're doing very well. And then we have two beds, there's I think 5 rows of carrots in a permanent raised bed. Then we have about 4 rows of the leeks in 2 permanent raised beds here. And then along the margin over there I have the potted perennials, which I have 3 different species. I have the thornless blackberries that we grow here, and then down further down and back down there are the black currants, and then I have one hostaberry as well. Okay, over here in the northern portion of the western garden plot, to the left of the screen here, I guess, since this is to my right, we have a couple plants of sage down here, some lemon basil, quite a bit of lemon basil, then some sweet basil at the very end of it down there. Then underneath the overhead irrigation there's oregano all along in that area, and then we get to the beans. Let's go over to where the beans are. Okay, so I'm in here inside of the cattle panel hoop, and to the right of the screen, or to my left, are the scarlet runner beans, the great big beans, delicious, fantastic refried beans. And certainly to my right, or to the left of the screen, are the Cherokee Trail of Tears, another fantastic bean. So they've been doing pretty well. We have 2 sections of these planted, but this is the westernmost garden plot, and this one was done first. Okay, I'm over here in the central garden plot. This is the garden plot that has the weed mat laid down, covering the paths, covering the permanent raised beds. There's no holes burned in these weed mats. This is the area that I had trouble with 3 different things. Certainly we have a plethora of millipedes, and we have pill bugs, cellar bugs. So those are two big challenges we've had. We've also had the problems with, well, two more things: the high winds knocking some of the plants over, and the weed mat. The temperature's getting so high, especially with this drought, the plants getting knocked over, or as Tim from Tim's Homestead had said, the plants leaning over and then touching the weed mat and getting burnt as well. So those have been four challenges that we've had with this garden plot this year. So we're going to make some modifications for next year. But let's take a look at what we've got. So right up against the building or the comfrey, that always does very, very well. Next to me right here on the left side of the screen are the sweet banana peppers. Really my favorite sweet pepper, better than the bell peppers. They took a big hit this year, and we did plant other plants in between them, some of the red cabbage, some kale as well. So in this row we have the sweet banana peppers. As I mentioned, we lost quite a few of those because of those 4 issues that we've had. We've subsequently planted some red cabbage in between these peppers. It's just unfortunate that we lost so many of these great peppers. Next row here are our San Marzano plums. I'm sorry, plum-like tomatoes, good for canning. Make a great paste, tomato paste and tomato sauce. Really hearty, thick, not so watery tomatoes. Really fantastic. This row is our mostly our bell peppers. There are a couple of sweet banana peppers that we had extras that we planted in the spaces where there were some problems. This is a couple of different varieties of heirloom tomato plants in here. Some of the taller ones down at the end. Ooh, way down there are some of the green Central Valley cherry-like tomatoes. In this row we've got our curly kale, which has really been doing fantastic, really hardy. Then we have some of our red Russian kale. We need to do lots of harvesting soon. And we have the row of jalapeno peppers. Some of those didn't make it, and we interplanted other plant species as well. Then we have our Oriental Charm eggplants over here, which have been doing pretty well. And then on the end over here we have our carrots, and the carrots have been doing pretty well. Now these ones were planted after, this whole garden bed was planted after the western garden bed that we just talked about. Okay, I'm over here next to the central garden, and to my right, the left side of the screen, way over to the side over there, is 1 permanent raised beds of Cabernet red onions. They're doing pretty darn well. However, I've had lots of weeds, so that was one big issue I've got to make sure that I address in the future. Whenever I'm going to put leeks, onions, or carrots, which don't have, well, carrots ultimately have a good shade, amount of shade that they can cast on the ground surface. But the onions and the leeks, they really don't. And the carrots in the beginning, they don't. So it's really wise to make sure that you manage the weeds well before those seedlings erupt, or you put the transplants in the ground. So that's something I've got to get a better hand on. Next to the Cabernet red onions are 2 raised beds of red cabbage. Then next to the red cabbage we have a bed of cauliflower. Had some big challenges with our cauliflower this year, and some of the red cabbage. We have lots of the cabbage moth here, and but the birds have been getting a lot of the caterpillars from the moth. They've been working this area pretty darn well. But many of our beneficial insects never really made it this year. Fortunately, the honeybees are back, or at least They're partially back, not nearly at the numbers that they used to be. The mason bees, we hardly had any of those. Our wasps that are parasitic wasps, very reduced in numbers. And all of our wasps are down in numbers. So this has been a really freaky year after that prolonged cold spell that we had. So that's really had an impact on the amount of pests that we've had to deal with in the gardens. And then we had the drought on top of that. Then on the other side, closer to your right side of the screen, my left-hand side, are 2 rows of broccoli. And they're doing fairly well considering all of these challenges have been here. Now we'll go take a look at the hoop trellis as well. So this hoop trellis borders the main drive going up the center of the eastern garden plot. To your right side of the screen are the beds that I just talked about. And here's the hoop trellis. Again, we have 2 different beans planted here. We have the Scarlet Red Runner beans, those big beautiful beans, and the really very hardy and very productive Cherokee Trail of Tears. Now this hoop trellis was started far after the first one on the west side of the garden. All these beds got put in late this season because it was so darn cold. Then there was the added bed that I put in this year that when I emptied all of those totes in a previous video, I took that soil, that compost in those totes, and put them over here on this in a trench that I dug out for this raised bed as well. So we have a combination of dill, celery, and collards planted in this bed here. Let's take a look at our third and final hoop trellis that we've got. Okay, we're over here at the final trellis that we've got on site right now. On the outside, on the northern edge of this trellis, we have butternut squash. They've been flowering and doing pretty well. We're just starting to get the beginning of the squash developing at this point. On the inside of the trellis, we have a couple of different plant species. We have a couple of different cultivars of chard bok choy in here. We have more of the Cabernet red onions planted in here. We have some chives that I transplanted over into this area. And do we have celery in here? No celery in here. Let's go to the south side of this hoop trellis. Okay, over here on the south side of the hoop trellis we have Georgia candy squash or pumpkin, sweet Georgia candy squash or pumpkin. This is an heirloom variety. This is our first year growing this one. They're already starting to produce some very nice looking squash plants. These are winter squashes that, according to Johnny Select Seeds and other YouTube videos, pretty darn sweet, good for pies, roasting, and we eat lots of squash during the winter months as well. Fantastic variety this one looks like, and we'll see how nutritious the seeds are as well. So this is one of the new heirlooms that we tried this year, and we'll see just how well it does do. Over on the east end of this hoop trellis we have cucumbers, which have been very productive so far this year, and some zucchini squash. We don't need too many zucchini squash because they're very prolific, and our favorite squash is a different one we'll show you in just a minute. Over behind me here is our most eastern permanent raised bed. These ones will all be modified ultimately, but here we have some of the light red kidney beans and some more of the Cabernet red onions as well. Now I'm standing in front of the two rumble wall raised block growing structures. So on each one of these, this one here and this one here, we have the strawberry plants. These ones didn't do quite as well this year as they have done in the past. I think it's because it was such a prolonged cold spell There could be some nutrient problems as well, and it could be a reduction of the pollinators. But the strawberry plants, the strawberries produced by these plants were quite small this season. So it's a combination of those three things. Like, it could have been a boron deficiency. But we really haven't had that problem on this site, and I'm always replenishing the compost. But the strawberries in the past have done fantastic, with the exception of this season. So I'm not going to change anything significantly yet until I see, analyze it a bit further. So this is one of our other raised beds. This is made out of 2x12s that are really decomposing at this point. This will be another area that I ultimately replace with a rumble wall blocked bed. And this year we're growing our Zephyr squash, which are absolutely fantastic, and they're very prolific. We use them for our wraps every day. We shred it up for our wraps. Thea's pickled them this year as well. They're great eating fresh, have a nutty taste right out of the garden. Absolutely fantastic, and they really are productive. Now, these are not an heirloom squash, and these are a summer squash, so they don't store. You've got to freeze them or dehydrate them or cook them up in some sort of dish if you want to preserve them. But or pickle them, as we're trying this year. But one of the things that we did plant a couple of the seeds from these F1 generation to see what would happen, and in that location it's produced some tasty, what I'm going to call Zephyr squash, like it's an heirloom. So I'm going to save the seeds from that plant and see if we can make that one be as productive in the future and switch into an heirloom potentially, or have the same reproducibility of other heirloom species as well. So here's a rain gutter garden right behind me here. This has been really good for growing the lettuce and spinach continuously. And one of the things that we've discovered with the lettuce, the romaine lettuce variety that we've been, yes, it is a romaine lettuce variety that we've been growing. It's kind of a cut and come again, sort of like our celery. If you harvest the plant without disrupting, you leave about 1/2 inch of the root base in the soil. You get 4 to 5 celery plants that come up around the periphery of it, and you can harvest that a second time in the season. These lettuce, so far we've harvested them 3 times. We let them get up to the point where they're going to bolt. We harvest it all the way until we hit that point where it's going to bolt. And then we take the whole plant, cut it off, leave the root mass in because it'll come again. And the top part of the plant goes to the ducks and the chickens as well. So that's pretty cool. Let's check out the watermelons. So I'm over here where the watermelons are planted, and last year we did an initial try of laying our weed mats down without burning holes in them, and planting our plants, putting our transplants in between those rows. Now last year, because of our fear that the weed mats would burn the watermelons, our various melon species, including watermelon plants, we laid cardboard on top of the weed mat so that the plants wouldn't get burnt by the weed mat getting so heated up. And as I've showed in a previous video, the temperatures really get sky high. And this year we've had a drought. So I didn't know how our watermelons would do this year, because we decided not to put cardboard on top of the weed mat fabric and lay the transplants on top of it. We just wanted to put them right down and see how they do. So over here we took our watermelon plants, put them in between the 2 rows, or 4 rows, but in between 2 of the rows of the weed mat fabric being laid down, and they've done extremely well. They've laid right on top of the weed mat when we had these really, really high temperatures, and they're producing their watermelons now. Also, we had a couple of sweet potato plants at this end, and they're doing well as well, even though the plants themselves lay on top of the weed mat fabric. One other thing I forgot to mention, I posted a video not that long ago about how we're controlling bindweed, and I used Bumblebee to come over here with the excavator, dig out all of the wood chips in this area, dig out carefully teased out all the roots that I could of the bindweed. We've had no bindweed problems in this spot where the watermelons are planted since doing that process. So we've really lucked out there. Okay, I'm up here in the second food forest area where the garden beds that we've grown the leeks in the previous years. These are permanent raised beds. This year I decided to use one of the beds. We're not growing the garlic this year. It's just I just don't have enough time to do it and do it appropriately and harvest all the materials. So this year we decided to grow our blue potatoes in a row in a permanent raised bed to make it easier for harvesting, a single row. We'll see how that ends up working out. They've been doing fantastic despite not getting any water during the severe drought. I never watered them at all this year. Alongside of it here is our first year growing another heirloom squash or pumpkin variety. This is a Blue Hubbard squash, great big massive squash. That is a good winter storage, good for pies, good for canning if you do want to can, but you don't have to can this, but it's great for roasting as well. And again, this is another one that I'm going to look at the nutrient density of the seeds as well. But these plants nearly died, so I ended up bringing up a couple of totes of water and watered them one time because they were all shriveling up. And we've been fortunate enough, as I mentioned in a previous video, we've gotten about 1.5 inches of rain over this last week, which has really helped the beds out. And with the cloud cover, that's actually decreased some of the heat as well. So these Blue Hubbards are looking a bit better. They aren't nearly looking as well as the Georgia candy squash that we've got in the other garden that I just showed you. But at least they're viable and the plants are looking good, and hopefully we'll be able to save some seed. These again are an heirloom variety, so we can save the seed from them and make sure that we can grow these each year. So that's it for our garden update this year, or at this time on July 27th, 2018. We've got lots of issues. This is a very challenging year. And we had the cold spring, which really decreased our pollinators. It really affected a lot of our beneficial insects that we depend on in this area. It put a delay to some of our amphibians as well. So it's been a challenging year. The drought, the cold spring, and trying some new things with the weed fabric as well. And I'll be producing more videos talking about how we're going to try and prepare ourselves for even worse times with worse droughts, with changing some things here on the property, some ideas that I have as well. So that's to come in the future. So if this video was of value, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends. I hope it's been helpful or informative or potentially inspiring in some ways so that you yourself may try some of these different plant varieties and potentially even learn from some of our mistakes as we go through this whole process and share it with you. Any questions or comments, please leave them below. I really do enjoy those. Even the ones that recently I got a comment where someone gave me a thumbs down, but they explained why they gave a thumbs down, and it was a good reason. So any constructive criticism is often helpful as well. Well, thanks so much for watching, folks, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.